So in this video I'm going to have a look at the gaming performance of Xiaomi's new Mi Notebook Air, the 13-inch model, and it's the revised 2018 edition. So what changed on this one was just really the CPU, and they've made some little enhancements with the color of it. You can see now in a dark gray, which does look pretty cool. It's a lot better than the silver. And then of course we have a new CPU, so it's an 8th generation i5 8250U. This has 8 GB of RAM in this configuration, so it's not really a gaming GPU. You're better off probably to start out with something like an NVIDIA 1050 Ti with 4 GB of RAM if you ask me. However, it is nice to have a dedicated GPU within such a small laptop. So this only weighs 1.32 kilos and it's around about 14 to 15 millimeters thin, so it's really ultrabook territory. Normally you only see the integrated graphics that you have, but this is good to have this on here. Okay, there are models out there like the Acer Swift. We've got the Swift 3 and the Swift 5, which also have this GPU, and a few other laptops. But let's check out the gaming performance of this. So in this review, I'm going to be monitoring the frames per second using MSI Afterburner. I will also overclock the GPU because I think most people will probably end up doing that, because really you get no negatives from that. It barely increases the temperature, and it does improve the performance around about 10 to 15%. Which is well worth it just for that tiny little tweak. So I'm going to also be monitoring the thermals of it, so internally and externally here with my thermal probe. So let's take a look at the gaming performance now. So from here on in, I'm going to be using a screen capture card. It's just a lot easier and just makes the games look better too using that. So this is GPU-Z that I've brought out here. You can have a look at the information of the GPU. So the NVIDIA MX150 with its 2 GB of double data rate 5 RAM, Samsung RAM. And you'll notice here that with the clocks, it's actually clocked a little bit lower than the same exact GPU that is in the 15.6-inch Pro model. Now they've done this because I feel of the cooling on it, just to give themselves a little bit more thermal headroom there with the more powerful CPU. So I mean, it's not great to see this at all. Now I'm going to apply this same overclock to the GPU that I did on the Pro model. So I've added a gigabyte to the memory clock. Now this is really the only real benefit we get of overclocking is the memory, because the core clock, even though I put 220 on here, will not really hold those turbos. So you don't really get that much of an advantage of actually getting more speed out of the GPU, the core clock there. So I'm going to be recording the frames per second. It's going to be up in the left-hand corner here, as well as temperatures. And I'm monitoring right now the temperatures too as well with HW info. That's going to be running the whole time just to see our maximum temperatures. You can see already 82 degrees is what it's hit there. So just a couple of benchmarks here. So this is the result of the stock Firestrike score. So 2,640. And then when I overclocked, that then goes up to 2,987. Now the graphics score you can see has moved quite a few points there. So it's gone from 2,899 then up to 3,224. So you do get a bit of a benefit there from the overclocking. And the last benchmark is Heaven. So this is slower than the Mi Notebook Pro. That got a score of 747 overclocked, and this is 721. So you can see they're a little bit slower. So the first time I'm going to test out is not DirectX 11 or 12, it's in fact using Vulkan, and this is Wolfenstein 2 The New Colossus, and I'll show you the settings. So I'm going to run with 720p, and it's on the low preset. I just tweaked the vertical sync, I turned that off, and the motion blur here. So let's see how it performs. Okay, that frame rate is looking pretty good actually. Well, I can see it's dipping down, but around 90 frames per second, that's not bad at all. So this is very playable at 720p, you can see. Rise of the Tomb Raider now. I'm going to go with 720p again, just like Wolfenstein there, because it's really not fast enough and smooth enough when you set it to 1080p. So these are the settings. I'm on the low preset. I haven't changed anything else. We'll just keep it on low there and see how this runs. Seems pretty playable. I mean, we're at 50 frames per second, so that's not too bad.
Looks like it. Demolition crews are...
Oh, and I'll also give you the results of the Tomb Raider benchmark. And the results, so the low preset, there we get an average score of 52.8 frames per second. Next up, project cars. So I'm going to go with 1080p on this one. It should run just fine. And these are the settings I'm going to use here. So texture resolution high, some of these other settings are set to medium. But overall, you can say more or less low kind of settings, really. Okay, so here we go, dipping down to 19 frames per second at the start, but hey, that's normal because it's rendering all of those cars there.
Green, green, green.
Looking very good, it's close to 60 frames per second, which is really what you want, so that's ideal, nice and smooth. Really no issues with this game. You can of course tweak that to your own personal preference, the visuals versus the performance. So we're seeing most of the time around 60 frames per second. This is really good. The occasional little different things to be expected right then is crashing to lowered it down to about 40 frames per second, but overall very good. This game is super playable. Next up, Battlefield 1. So the server's pretty much full there, about 63 players. I'm going to jump right into the front line here into the action and we'll see how it handles it. So about 50 frames per second. Not looking too bad at all. Considering we've only got 2 gigabytes of RAM on this, you have to remember. It's not a lot compared to other cars that have 3 or 4.
We are losing objective butter.
So it won't be long before I die, probably. Let me find where that guy with a horse went. Oh, grenade, dead. Yeah, okay. So I told you it wouldn't take me long to die. But yeah, it's not looking bad there. Around 50 frames per second, dips down to about 35. But all in all, very playable at 720p on low. Now to very quickly have a look at Counter-Strike Global Offensive. So this is 1080p, highest possible settings. We're getting around 80 frames per second. And I will have to warn you, if you haven't seen my other videos, that my gameplay is horrendous. This one is running really good. And yes, I can't aim. Not very well at all. And dead. But you get the idea that even on the highest settings, 1080p, this is looking pretty good. And super playable. Grand Theft Auto 5. So I'm going to try it on 1080p. And these are the settings. So I tweak things down here. So really normal to, well, low, you could say, really. Because I haven't got some of those more advanced filters on. I've turned them off. Let's check it out. So 1080p, this is running fine. You can see with those settings I selected and just previously showed you. Around 65 frames per second it dips down to and hovers around 80. See if I can make this jump. Probably not fast enough actually. Oh, just. My landing's not very good though. And lastly, The Witcher 3. So this is quite a demanding game, so I'm just going to leave it on 720p. I have it set to low,
And this time around, unlike the last time, I stuffed up and I had the VSync still on, but that is off now and the frame rate is also set to unlimited. So let's check out and see how it performs. Right, so looking good. I decided that I would load a save that's set in a city because that's highly populated. So this is probably a little bit more demanding than being out in the wilderness. To give us an idea here that it's going to be perfectly fine and playable at 720p on the low settings. You see there are a couple of little tiny stutters, but overall I mean that frame rate is looking good. And if there's a bit of action going on and things like that, of course it probably will dip down, but Witcher 3 perfectly fine and playable. I actually just started a fight with one of the guards. Of course I won't be able to win, but see what happens with the frame rate.
Bad idea.
So it does dip down a little. Alright now, so to take a look at the thermals, we got up to 83 degrees on the CPU there. That is perfectly fine. It doesn't get any hotter than that. Now this is after 4 hours and 20 minutes of pretty much non-stop gaming. The average temperature there is 68 degrees, so it's pretty warm most of the time. And a look at the GPU. So something here got into the red, so that's that Samsung. Well, this is kind of normal really because these drives do get really hot. I was writing a lot to that and reading from that, of course. GPU up to 75 degrees, so a little bit hotter than the likes again of the Mi Notebook Pro because that one just has better cooling and it is larger.
And now to check the external temps, of course, which is very important. So just above the keyboard, which was an area of concern on the previous model, is now currently about 40 degrees, you can see there, but that does peak up to about 45 degrees Celsius. So only really 5 degrees cooler to the touch in that area. The keyboard area, the Q and W keys around there is a bit of heat too, about 42 degrees. Middle of the keyboard also gets quite warm. The palm rest now, you can see, is about 28 degrees. The touchpad, 28, and about 30 on the left-hand side. So overall, the temperatures, yes, they have improved slightly, the surface temperatures, but it still does get quite warm to the touch. So I've had the laptop looping Unreal's Heaven benchmark here, and that's been going now for about an hour and a half, and it's reaching peak temperatures. But I'll just give you a sample of the fan noise that you can expect when you're gaming on this notebook. Okay, so there we go. You can see that it's not a beast when it comes to gaming, but it does surprise with a lot of titles that you would think, well, hang on, Witcher 3 would be far too demanding. We wouldn't be able to play that game at all on this kind of hardware, but it's good that we can. Okay, you have to lower the settings, you have to lower the resolution on some games from 1080p, so native screen resolution, down to 720p, but I think it's a fair kind of trade-off considering the hardware. So a lot of games there, the frame rates are okay, they're not amazing, we're not getting 60 frames per second. This isn't a G-Sync monitor, this is not a gaming laptop as I mentioned in the start, but still great that we can do this. Now there's some areas that disappoint me a little bit, in fact quite a bit, that of course I think due to the thermals and the cooling on this and the fact that they didn't separate those heat transfer pipes and put two separate fans for each of those heat transfer pipes, so one for the GPU, one for the CPU, just like the Mi Notebook Pro. Now it's all the same as the last year model, so they've actually limited the clock performance, so the GPU is not boosting up as high as the Mi Notebook Pro, so the performance is reduced just a little bit there, and also the CPU will run into thermal throttling a lot sooner than really it needs to, but that is again just giving themselves a little bit of thermal headroom with the limited cooling that is on this. Now it does heat up, as we've seen, that it does get quite hot around these areas here along the top eventually. Now when you first use it, like my unboxing, I was running it for about 30 minutes, temperatures were only about 44, 45 degrees, but after a while, as you've seen in this video, that yeah, it creeps up and gets quite hot on the bottom too as well. So really, if you're going to be doing a lot of gaming and that is your main purpose of your laptop that you're going to be looking to buy, then I wouldn't even get something like this. This is really a travel ultrabook laptop with a GPU that does let you play games. You're better off getting something, as I always say, with at least a 1050 Ti with 4 gigabytes of RAM if you can, and they sell for a similar kind of price range as this here. Thanks a lot for watching this review here. Now, if you haven't checked out my unboxing that goes into a lot of detail with this particular laptop, not just gaming, then that is up right here. And my latest videos here as well. And I do hope to see you back with the full and final review of the Mi Notebook Air 13, the revised 2018 model.